will be our parliamentarian, Ellie Mina. And Ellie is an expert in the Robert's Rules of Order, and he's also one of the people who, during the council meetings, will sit up here at the main table.
You can see me. Okay. Good morning, everybody. And so I'm Ellie Mina. I'm ALA Parliamentarian. It's been my pleasure in serving in this position for the past 12 and a half years, and I'll tell you a bit more about the history of it in a few minutes. And the job for the next 20 minutes is an impossible one, which is essentially standing in front of a videotape camera to make you, by the end of 20 minutes, experts in 700-some pages of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, which is the new parliamentary authority for ALA. Obviously, it's an impossible task, but I'll do the best I can to give you the most important provision that will be applicable to you. Does everybody have the handout package that is entitled, what is it, An Introduction to Rules of Order, etc.? Everybody has it? Because I'll be using it a bit, and so I just wanted to be sure that you have it. And my style is to do my presentation interactively, so from time to time I'll ask you to raise your hand and see how things go. And I would suggest that to make it easier for you to ask questions, maybe someone can hand over them, take the microphones and hand them over to you, because this being a technical subject, I don't want it to be intimidating for any of you. If you have a question, no such thing as a silly question. Let's make sure that we hear them. So, question for you. Those who are continuing as a counselor, raise your hand. Thank you, lower your hand. And those who have never been on council before. Okay, so majority have not been on council before. Here is a situation comes to mind. I remember some years ago, probably earlier in my involvement with ALA, when someone stood before a newly elected group and said this. He said, for the first year, given that we're working with a group of as many as 160 or 70 people in the room, maybe you want to be just quiet, not say anything, don't get yourself embarrassed, just stay safe for the first year or so. And given that I was a few speakers behind him, this is what I ended up saying. I said, with respect, I beg to differ. And it is this: each of you is a counselor, has one vote. It doesn't matter whether you've been around for 1 day or 15 years, you still have one vote. And because of it, the influence of a decision-making process is equal. It obviously means that for new counselors, you have a job of upping your knowledge level and going through a steep learning curve before you participate. But conversely, what I find is, as I sit here and I'm being quiet, I'm not participating in a debate, but I listen. And sometimes I hear the most interesting comments being brought forward by the newest person on council. So again, the fact that you knew should not be held against you. You're a voting member just like everybody else. Question to do with rules of order. Those, sometimes again, think about the sentiment towards Robert's Rules, or it used to be Sturgis Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure. So if you happen to be passionate about rules of order as I am, hands up. Oh, I have two, rare. Maybe I get you to join the National Association of Parliamentarians. We have a convention in Washington, D.C. in September. Exciting times. So that's that. Those who kind of accept and tolerate the rules, it's just something that we do. Raise your hand if you tolerate it. And then the third one will be, the moment we mention rules, I begin to suffer. Suffering and pain. Okay, so some of you may remember the phrase, suffering is optional. That is very much the spirit with which I've interpreted the rules and helped organizations. Essentially, the rules are there as a means to an end. They're not there as an end in themselves. They're not to be used as a way of baffling, confusing, and intimidating people. They're to help you. They're a tool to help you facilitate the decision-making process, introduce motions, debate them, maybe move to amend them, maybe move to refer them to a committee. All of those as the tools that are available to you so you can make the decision-making process as effective as it can be. Again, procedure is a means to an end. It isn't an end in itself. So just like to tell you briefly about how I fell into this field. It kind of happened by coincidence, but started a long time ago, 1981, when I joined a nonprofit organization. And at some point during the meeting, until which time things went reasonably well, was quite interesting. The president took a piece of wood looking like a hammer. They called it a gavel, tapped it on the table and said, the business meeting is now in order, is called to order. And I had no idea what they were doing. It sounded like a foreign language to me, especially when there was those motions, amendments to the amendments, and was completely confused. At some point, someone raised a point of order, and the chair made a ruling on that point of order, and the member disagreed with the chair, and they said, I appeal the decision of the chair. And they took a vote on the appeal and overrode the decision of the chair. And he got so upset that he walked away from the meeting. We never saw him again. So we saw it as a personal attack. Just so you know, how Robert goes says, the decision on the ruling is not personal. It's not about the chair. It's about the ruling. Was the ruling of the chair deemed to be correct or incorrect? So that's the essence of appealing from the decision of the chair. So that was way back in 1981, but somehow I got interested in this some more. And at the end of 1983, once I got a bit comfortable with this, the phone rang and this unusual, unexpected call came in. The individual said, I have a convention that I'm organizing with 150 people traveling from across Canada. And they're all very, very passionate about the issues that we discuss. And we have some controversial resolutions, quite a few of them, and a massive amendment to our bylaws, so we could be in some trouble. Someone saw you chair a meeting, you seem to know what you're doing, will you help us out? If any of you get that phone call, I suggest you say yes, as I did. But then make sure to learn some more so you get comfortable with the procedure. And if you do want to join any of the parliamentary organizations, I'd be glad to give you the contact information. There are two of them, the National Association and then American Institute of Parliamentarians. Both of them have meetings, so you get to meet people of this strange, unusual occupation. So that was 1983, 84, and then subsequently it somehow grew on me and moved away from my engineering career into being a professional parliamentarian and serving organizations such as ALA, a nonprofit organization, as well as a lot of work with municipal government, boards of education, school board, health boards, public board, a lot of work with boards. And sometimes my work amounts to just education, similarly to what I'm doing today. And there are times when organizations get into a bit of trouble, so then I come in on what you might call a rescue mission, to move them away from attacking one another and to a place where they're discussing issues, debating issues, and not attacking personalities. So that has become my occupation. In 2002, end of 2002, this was the request for proposal from the American Library Association, and you have a policy that says the parliamentarian has to be an individual who is not a personal member of ALA. So I was approached together with a few other people. We had a very lively and spirited interview with 6 people in the office next to Keith Michael Field's office. And at the end of that day, I got the call back that ALA wanted to negotiate the agreement with me. So ALA is quite an interesting organization from my perspective. It has its own unique culture, and I need to talk about that as the culture relates to the procedure as we go through our conversation. Now, what happened also in last year, actually a couple of years ago, the book that you were using as your parliamentary authority, which was Sturgis Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure, was discontinued. It became an e-book, and the American Institute of Parliamentarians came up with AIP Standard Code, which means ALA needed to make a decision on whether or not it wanted to move on to the AIP Standard Code or to move to Robert's Rules of Order. And after some discussion, and the vote was taken in midwinter and subsequently ratified to switch to the current edition, Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. My job is to explain a bit about the differences. Maybe I can share a few thoughts. The first one is I had to consider the 12.5 years of meetings of ALA Council that I've observed and served as an advisor on. And I have to say that a number of times that the application between Robert and Sturgis would be different, I could count on one hand. Not many occasions. The treatment of resolutions, the treatment of amendments, the treatment of motions to postpone, to refer, motion to a point of order, to raise a point of order, to appeal the decision of the chair. All of these things came up in the past 12 and a half years, and the treatment will be exactly the same. There's some places where it's different. So in the handout package that I gave you, I made a list of key places where they seem to be different. There's obviously quite a few more, but those are the things that did come up at the meeting that I attended. Give you yet another perspective on this, and I'm saying it because people got it. There was a bit of a discussion on what is the difference. I'm a member of the American Institute of Parliamentarian, and we have meetings as well. So I recall about 10 years ago, and this is what happened. The president suggested to the group that for this meeting, although normally we use Robert, they said we'll use Sturgis for the next 3 days, and we'll see how much of a difference it makes. And at the end of 3 days, and consider this is a group of parliamentarians. This is what they make a living at. At the end of the 3 days, the president noted that the difference was only in two very minute places. So clearly, when you get into the technical aspects of things, the books can be different. Now, I need to point to one of the phrases, my favorite phrases in, I call it RONR, Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. And this is the big fat Bible, 700 pages. And just so you know, this is the kind of pocket guide. This is written by the same authors, called Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised in brief. So the same authors recognized that for the average person, they would need 700 pages, so they produce a more concise and maybe more user-friendly manual. But they still say that the definitive book is this one, Robert's Rules of Order, the current, newly revised, the full book. That's the authority. So one of my favorite sentences is on the last page of the handout package, and that's page 4. So if everybody flip over, if you don't mind. And so we have, it's a second paragraph from the end, and RONR, page 250, lines 11 to 15, and this is what it says. In ordinary meetings, it is undesirable to raise points of order on minor irregularities of a purely technical character if it is clear that no one's rights are being infringed upon and no real harm is done to the proper transaction of business. To me, this is quite profound. Essentially, we want to say we don't want to nitpick, and nitpicking really creates an unsafe meeting environment where people get uptight and afraid to go to a microphone for fear of someone who's going to raise a point of order. We look for this. We look to make sure to protect individual rights, and we also want to make sure that the business is properly getting done. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Example when I don't get excited could be this. Let's say that one of the rules in Robert is that the maker of the motion is not allowed to speak against the motion that they made. So if someone is preparing a resolution, presents it, they're kind of expected to speak in favor of it. It makes sense, but here is a thought. Suppose the individual does what Pat and Gina were suggesting, learn from the discussion, and as a result of it, they change their mind, and they say, I'm going to vote against the motion that I made. And so they go to the microphone, and they say, I now decided I'm going to vote against my motion. I want to explain why. And then you hear noise on the other side of the room. Point of order. What's your point of order? You're not allowed to speak against the motion that you made. Well, you know what? This is exactly fits within this sentence. What are we doing here? Are we nitpicking, or are we looking to use the rules in a way that facilitates informed, effective decision-making? So in this case, I would say, let's not worry about this. It's a rule. Usually it makes sense, so we'll follow it. But there are times when we don't need to worry about small violations as long as no one's rights are being compromised, as long as the business gets properly done. Okay? Now, on the other hand, here is another example where we would worry about things. Council quorum. We need to have a minimum number of members present to conduct business. How many of you know the magic number? Out of 186, we need to have 75 is the minimum. So usually it's not a problem, and actually it's quite an impressive thing to say about ALA that people travel from across the country, and out of 186, usually we get between 130 to 150. So it's quite an accomplishment, but the time that it could become problematic is when we get close to the end of Council 3, and so it happened at least in 2003 once when it got close to 12 o'clock and people need to go and catch planes, and so we were getting to lose our quorum requirement. So in those instances, for someone to say, point of order, we do not have a quorum anymore, does affect the assembly because decisions that are made without a quorum are technically not valid decisions. Okay? Another possibility could be, and so here is how it goes, under the process, we have Alimina sitting here at the clock, and we have Joanne Kemp keeping the speakers list, and the presiding officer is here, and presenters will be here. So Joanne's job during a meeting is to keep a list with how many microphones? 7 microphones. She would advise the chair who is the next speaker on the microphone. Okay. But suppose Joanne, by chance, missed someone, and that individual is getting frustrated because really they are the next in line. They've been waiting, and someone who lined up after her or him, is recognized to speak. So you go, point of order. My point of order, so-and-so was first. So if you notice an error like that, is anyone's rights being violated here? Yes. The principle is first come, first served. So if someone is being ignored and you want to bring attention to it, their rights are being affected. In that case, this phrase will not apply. Okay, so rules of order are not there to become an end in itself. They're just there to facilitate, but if someone's rights are being violated, or if the business is not getting properly done, then raising those points would be appropriate. So let me pause for a moment. How are we doing so far? That phrase is one of my favorite. Okay, so let's look at a few things that happen. And to explain a bit about what are some of the roles that I assume and how some of the observations. So clearly the primary role that the parliamentarian would serve would be to sit here and give the president advice, the presiding officer advice on the application of parliamentary procedure, on time management, whatever it is that's needed. I have no vested interest in any of the outcomes. In other words, I don't tell anyone how to vote and to vote yes, to vote no. That's your business. We just look at making sure that the process is there, the process is clear and clean. So that's the role of the parliamentarian. The president is the one who makes the ruling. I usually don't speak at the meeting at all. If I do, I sometimes have, but it's a very unusual circumstance for me to actually speak from that position. Some other things, some proactive work that we do in order to make sure that with this many people, the meeting is well planned and we anticipate the problem. One of them is the presiding officer, the president-elect, who will be the backup to the presiding officer, plus the executive director, and Lois Ann Gregory Wood and a couple of other people, would meet in the morning prior to a meeting. So usually there's 3 meetings like those. When we have what we call the prompt book, we review the script, we review the meeting, we anticipate any problem that might occur, and just prepare for those problems. So that's another role. I have made it my practice to also attend what was described here as a council forum, and I'd like to echo and second the recommendation. Please plan to attend it. New councillors, I found them, I go and attend as an observer. I always sit in the back. But it's a place where you learn. I think at council setting, it can be quite intimidating and very, very formal, and the council forum is less formal, and again, recommendation is it's a good way to get to know council and to get to work in the less formal settings. As parliamentarian, I sit and observe. And then another thing that I have done, and that was on my own initiative, I decided to put in at the end of each session, midwinter and annual, to put together a report that is containing commendations and recommendations, observations about how the meeting went, and some suggestions of the procedural nature of how future meetings could be done differently. So let me see what else. The process. So let's talk about a few things, and then towards a little bit later, I'll comment on some of the differences between Robert and Sturgis. One of the thoughts is, what is the process? When we think about the decision-making process, and I use some words to describe it. One of them is the process needs to be orderly. Orderly means we speak in order. Nobody speaks, we don't have 3 or 4 people speaking at the same time, so the chair will recognize people in the order in which they go to the microphone, and then you need to open by saying, hi, I am you say your name, and you say, I'm counselor at large, or I'm chapter counselor for this and this chapter. So that will be the formality. But essentially, it means that people don't shout people down from their seat. It means that if you want to speak, say you disagree with someone, you line up at the microphone, and so the process is orderly. We'd have one person speaking at a time, not a choir happening in the room. Okay, so that's one. The process needs to be focused. So when we are discussing a resolution, I speak in favor or I speak against a resolution or have mixed feelings about it. All of those would be appropriate, but speaking about the movie that you might have seen is not focused on the issue at hand. It gets a bit confusing, though, not all that simple, when we have an amendment. So a resolution is presented, someone proposes a substantive amendment to it, and then the discussion needs to be on the amendment. So we kind of push the pause button on the resolution and we begin to discuss the amendment. Other possibility is if during the discussion of the resolution, someone believes it should be studied more by a certain committee, like let's say Committee on Legislation, then any of you could prepare a motion to refer. I move that the resolution be referred to, and you say which body, which committee should it be referred to. One of the typical committees that gets referral is called BARC. Anyone knows what that is? BARC. Budget Analysis and Review Committees, because resolutions need to have the financial foundation for them. And if they have fiscal implications, the policy is that they do go to BARC for assessment. And then, so a decision needs to be made by council to do that. So if a resolution is in front of you, you think it needs to be studied, I move that it be referred. So in that case, the focus is on the motion to refer. Okay, and so that's it. So what did we say? Orderly, focused. What is this? Timely. And the process is timely. So one of the greatest challenges I face as parliamentarians is I'm looking at the number of items on the agenda and how much time do we have. And the more resolutions we have and the more action items are proposed by the committees coming before you, the more challenging it is. So the challenge is always to balance the rights of individuals to speak and to express their views and to learn from one another and to make fully informed decisions, which is, I think, what you need to do, with the need to make sure that we conclude the business within the available time. So one of the things that we do in terms of time management is the lights. And so you'll find a set of lights here, quite a few of them. But you'll see the green light when you begin to speak, if you go and speak, and that would mean you have 3 minutes left. The green light will remain on for 2 minutes, and then if you continue to speak, you have 1 minute left, the yellow light comes on, and then when time's up, the red light begins to flash. So we have some show happening here. And by the way, I never had a chance to do this, but there is an option on the device there to, if someone goes over the 3-minute time limit, I can push a button and it begins to beep. So it gets to be interesting and exciting, but all to do with time management. People ask me in the past, what happens if someone wants to extend the time? Let's say someone has a more substantial statement to make than 3 minutes permit. Then who do you think will make the decision to grant them that time? The decision will be made by? We're not working with monarchy. We're working with democracy. So the presiding officer can suggest it, can try what's called unanimous consent and say, is there any objection to allowing the individual to speak for another minute? Looking around, no objection, you have another minute. Or if there is an objection, those in favor of granting the extra time and those against granting the extra time. And to deviate from the normal rule, once the rule is approved, 3 minutes, will take, under Robert, a 2/3 vote. Okay, 2/3 vote to suspend the rules and allow individuals to speak longer. Okay, so just so you know, timely. How are we doing so far? Processes. So what did we say? Orderly, focused, timely, fair. Fair would mean nobody gets to speak a second time on the same motion when someone else is waiting to speak for the first time. So usually that Joanne's role would be to watch, and if she sees someone rushing to the microphone to speak a second time, but someone else has not spoken, just a moment. And so then we make sure that we're fair and equal. No one gets to speak many times when other people have not spoken yet. So that's fundamental to the process. The other thing is that the process is courteous, so we don't attack individuals ever. There's no nasty comments about the individuals and the motivation. We talk about what the individuals propose. So comments must be directed to the issues, not to personalities in the room. So the process is respectful, civilized. We want to have an effective democracy that tolerates and celebrates diversity of opinions, but never goes to the place of nasty attacks against individuals or shouting people down. And I'm sad to say that that actually did happen. So we needed to comment on that and bring the group back to the place where it needs to be. Diversity of opinions is here. Sometimes it will be controversial, but we still need to comment on what the individuals say rather than individuals themselves. Okay? So it's courteous, it's respectful, it's civilized. That's what the process needs to be. And one thing that is not so much of a Robert's Rules perspective, I would think with ALA, the ALA culture is the process is informed. And it's like a religion here, and I can say that it's not one that is documented in the book. Robert doesn't say, thou shalt make informed decision. It doesn't say that. Thou shalt allow enough debate. It doesn't say that, because you cannot legislate common sense. But to me, that common sense is very abundantly here. I've seen, for example, the motion to close debate when it's premature, when there's still, let's say, 5 people here, 5 people here, 5 people there waiting to speak, and if some of them move to end the debate, which takes a 2/3 vote, both in Robert and Sturgis, a 2/3 vote, usually that would end up being defeated because people say, you see quite a few people, there's still quite a bit to learn. So I'd say that that's contrary to what I see in other organizations. I can say, including my own, the National Association of Parliamentarians, one of the parliamentary organizations. So sometimes this is my frustration. As a member, I go to the microphone and I want to say something which has not been said by other people. But the person ahead of me in the lineup, I move the previous question, which is the same as I move to end the debate. So sometimes that group gets into what I call collective impatience. They just want to move forward. Come on, let's move on. And 2/3 vote is not difficult to get in that setting. In your setting, it's my experience, it's impossible to get it if there hasn't been sufficient debate. That's culture. You see the rules being used and applied differently depending on the personality and the culture of the organization. I happen to respect this culture that you have here very much. I think it's very fundamental to a good, strong democracy, an informed democracy, even if it isn't written in any book. So one thing that I put together as far as the process, in addition to all these words of being orderly, focused, efficient, in addition to that, I think the process is strong, gentle and strong at the same time. It's gentle and respectful, but at the same time, it's firm. And I'd say it's almost like your best friend. You need to know the process. You need to respect the process. And when the process is being breached, someone needs to maybe defend the process by raising point of order. And someone described this as strong and gentle at the same time, like a velvet gavel, meaning it's strong, it's firm, but also it is soft and gentle. So it's nice to work with. It supports you into being an effective democracy. How is my time? I'm okay. Okay. So I think I covered most things. We talked about time management. Sometimes in terms of time management, we get into the crunch. Let's say that we're an hour away from the last meeting, Council 3, and we have 3 more resolutions. The language that I suggest to the chair is something like this. Council, we have 3 resolutions and a total of 1 hour before we need to adjourn. Is there any objection to allowing 20 minutes per resolution? So then with your agreement, if nobody objects, it ends up being 20 minutes per resolution, which means that I look at a different way of timing, and then you get informed when the time is up for this particular resolution. So time management, making sure that there is adequate amount of time, but not excessive amount of time for certain resolutions, which end up compromising subsequent resolutions. That's the kind of a balancing act that we face. I'll give you a few more myths or a few other procedures to think about. One of them is seconding a motion. When someone says, I second the resolution or second the motion, does it mean that you agree with the motion? So under both Robert and Sturgis, you don't agree with it, you're just saying, I agree that it should be discussed. And Robert even says you can second the motion because you strongly disagree with it, because you want it to be discussed and you think it will be defeated, and so that might be your intent in seconding the motion. Very often it's a misconception that people will say enthusiastically, I'll second it, as though they agree with it, when in fact you're not required to agree in order to second the motion. I mentioned the word amendment, and sometimes that become a bit of a, time-wise, become a bit of an anxious moment. So ALA Council approved this policy some years ago. And this is what it was. Because the problem at hand was that sometimes grammatical minor amendments that have no substantive impact were presented in taking up time, which meant that the amendment is displayed on the screen, the chair says, is there any debate? And they take a show of hands. So the policy was that to authorize the executive director to make housekeeping changes, grammatical or otherwise, to a resolution without touching the intent in any way whatsoever. So that could be something that the chair might have to say if someone is making one of those housekeeping amendments. Can we please pass that on to Keith Michael Fields so council can focus on the big picture instead of descending to the minutia level and dealing with a comma here or a word that's not quite right here. So it's just looking at the intent, the overall intent, the big picture. When we bring in people from across the country, traveling long distances, and time is tight, we want to make sure that the time is spent in the most effective and the most focused way, probably on the higher level, on the policy level, instead of looking at every word and every comma. Okay? And let me see. One of the places that you'll find on the last page where there is a difference between Sturgis and Roberts, I'll point at least to this one. That's on that page under closing debate. And Robert calls it the previous question, but we can tolerate different words. It doesn't matter what the words are, it matters the intent. So if you say, I move to end debate, that would be fine. But one of the things that's different is that Sturgis prohibits you from speaking in debate and then saying, and I move to end the debate. It doesn't like that. Sturgis did not allow you to do that. Robert permits you to do it. So that's one small difference between the two. And there's a few other differences here. One of them is the motion to table, and that has been used at ALA on one occasion to, under Sturgis, tabling can use to kill a pending motion. So you don't want to vote on it, you just want to get rid of it. So you move to table it, and in that case, tabling requires a 2/3 vote. When Robert used tabling in a completely different way, so the appropriate motion to, in this case, to get rid of a pending motion is to move to postpone it indefinitely. Means I want to kill it, I want to get rid of it. So that's just a different tool. It has not been used very much. I think it was used only once in a 12.5 years. So that's one of the differences between Sturgis and Robert. And I'm just trying to look at others. Closing debate, division of the, that came up actually a couple of times. If you have a resolution that has two parts, and in the estimation of one of you, it would be better to divide it and deal with each part separately. Under Sturgis, it would be the demand of one individual, and you need to divide it, just one individual. Under Robert, it's an agreement of the assembly, so it's a democratic, it's a collective decision, not the decision of one individual. So that's another difference. Anyway, I think I've spoken long enough. Is there any questions? Any questions on any of the procedure? Just remember, suffering is optional. So, questions? Microphone? Hopefully that's, yeah, Mary has a question. Maybe pass on the microphone to her. That'd be.
Thank you. I want to thank Ellie for bringing out a point that I strongly agree with. That's the right of the individuals, and we should respect one another, because it has happened in several of the council meetings where we had cat calls and boos. And I think at all times, no matter, and I'm not trying to supersede you in your explanation, but I think at all times, no matter how heated the conversations are or how strongly we feel, we still have to respect our colleagues and deliberate in a real democratic manner. Thank you very much for bringing that up.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And in a good democracy, we celebrate diversity of opinions. And so we certainly don't have to agree and vote the same way. But the idea is make sure people have a chance to attempt to persuade you. And if you're persuaded, you are. If you're not, you're not. But you never attack the individual. You always talk about the perspective. Okay? So look forward to working with you, and thank you.